Hello once again, it's Mr. Pete, your YouTube shop teacher. Welcome back, and this is part 4 of a multi-part series that I'm making on the tiny little Manson micro lathe. I hope you have watched the first 3. This is tips number 933, where we're going to finally get around to making some chips with this little thing, if it's capable. So I hope you watched the first 3 where I talked about how it works. I took this apart so you could see the different parts, lubrication, talked about all of the accessories and many other things. So watch those videos, and there'll be several more after this one. When you're working with a tiny lathe, you need a selection of tiny tools. So look what I've got laid out, and this micrometer is a 1/2 inch micrometer, not a 1 inch. I might need to use an indicator in this video, but the Noga here with a 2-inch indicator is a little bit out of proportion and extremely awkward and actually impossible to use. Even my smaller indicator holder is a bit clumsy, and I took the 1.5 inch diameter off because that's out of proportion as well, and mounted the last word with the probe at a right angle, and I believe that's going to do the job. And I believe this indicator setup will be pretty useful. Let me zoom in just a little bit. Now that's a piece of 1/4 inch aluminum held between centers. No dog on there yet. Let me just spin it, and you can see that it's running fairly true at this point. Maybe 2 or 3 thousandths off, but that's pretty darn good when you think about it. Now I must confess that I did drill those center holes on a big lathe to expedite matters. Now I'm going to get back to this later on as far as indicating is concerned, because there is a little 4-jaw chuck. Just wanted to show you some of the setups and some of the tools that I think I will be using. And I think you will realize that a 6-inch scale is really way too big and clumsy. It's hitting the end of the tailstock here, so I'll use this little 2-inch Brown and Sharp ruler. And I think I've got one even shorter than that someplace, but I lost it because it's so little. As I get ready to actually turn this thing on, it's going to vibrate and walk around on me because it only weighs 5 pounds, so I am going to screw it down to the table or to a piece of wood so it will not move and it'll be steady, and even though my hands aren't. Okay, I'm getting ready to rumble, and one thing I want to make clear here as I work on this micro lathe is this is not a complete tutorial on how to run any old lathe, because that's been covered over and over and over. So I'm just showing you things that may be of interest in working with the tiny lathe. Remember that I'm learning here too. So I've got a piece of 1/4 inch aluminum, and I put a center hole in each end, and I use a number 1 center drill, a little smaller than we're used to using. This is the typical number 3, that, or I don't know what, number 5 I guess. But anyway, it's very tiny, and I've mounted the dog. This is about 2.5 inches long, just a drop of oil there. And I'm just using regular oil. I don't think it needs to be high pressure lubricant. And the tiny 1/8 inch diameter tool needs to be set on center, so loosening up this. Remember, it's on a rocker here, just like on a real lathe. Well, this is a real lathe. I mean a big lathe. So I can raise it and lower the height of the tool, and then double check it here on the center to make sure. You see it's way above center right now, and we want it on center. Are my hands in the way? Look at how big my fingers look. Embarrassing. Banana fingers. Okay, that's good. Now I'll tighten it down, but I'm going to put it in the orientation that I want and snug it up, always using discretion in how tight you make things, remembering, you know, that that's a number 6 screw or something like that in there, so it is tiny. And now I will mount the work between centers in the lathe. The dog has been mounted and snugged down nicely. The tail of the dog has to go into the slot here on the drive plate. like that, and I'll bring the tailstock up into the center hole, which has been pre-lubricated, and then we always double check how much pressure we're putting toward the headstock with the tailstock hand wheel. We want to be able to wiggle the dog a little bit so you can even hear it in the slot there, and then you would make sure that the clamp is tight on your tailstock and tighten the quill lock if you have a quill lock. I'm going to turn down this shaft about to the black line that you see right there. Remember, there are no graduations here on the cross-feed dial, so I'm kind of guessing, but I want to take it down to about 3/16 of a diameter. That's 0.187, and I will mic it, and I'm going to use power feed. I have no idea how heavy a cut that I need to take, but here we go anyway. I like to live dangerously. It's alive! It's alive! Well, it does cut, but the cuts have to be, the depth of the cut has to be very minimal, but look at how fine the chips are. The finish, not real great, but that tool has no radius on the end. I was rather wondering what the feed rate is, because there is no adjustment for that. There's one feed rate in low and one in high. Proportional, of course. So the tip of the indicator is right up against the carriage there. I'm going to turn the machine on now and watch the needle, and then I'll zoom in. So you can see that it is advancing. Now let me reset this, and I'm going to turn by hand just one revolution, and that will tell us what the rate of feed is. When I zoom in on the indicator, I'm going to turn the lathe dog exactly one revolution, and I've got the indicator pretty well zeroed out. It's real fiddly because everything's so small, but watch it now as I rotate the spindle. There's one full turn, so let's call it a 2/1000 feed. I hope I'm not wasting time here, but I've got this big old indicator tip on the end of the cross slide, and I'm going to turn the cross feed exactly one revolutions, but as I do that, I'm going to zero in on the indicator. But the reason I'm doing this is I have no idea what one turn is. I don't know how many thousandths it is if I want to turn to diameter. So zooming in. Okay, watch the indicator now as I make one. That's a half a revolution, and that is a full revolution, so it's about 30 thousandths of an inch when I turn the ball crank. Watch it again now. One full revolution. So a half a revolution is about 15, and I'll just figure that out in my head as I go. But anyway, I feed it a tiny amount, I guess, to take off a few thousandths. I could leave the indicator. Well, I will. Well, there's no charge. I'm going to leave the indicator on there. What am I thinking? Okay, this is a 5/1000th depth of cut in aluminum. Let's see what happens. Pretty good. That's probably the depth that I want for a roughing cut. I won't show the whole thing. I can actually hear that tiny motor labor. So I'm going to bring that back. And it's cutting pretty well, but I notice that the lever here keeps jumping out, so I actually have to hold it. Or when I look back up, and you may have noticed that already, it has jumped out a little bit on me. I don't know if there's an adjustment for that or not. Now, can I even get in there with a micrometer? It's pretty crowded. See, the micrometer is hitting the cross slide. So I'll have to come in there like this to do my measuring. Now as I finish the cut, I want to show you something. Pretty much up to the shoulder, and when I back it off, it's still cutting quite a bit. So I could probably take another pass at the same setting. So there's quite a bit of flexing or something going on there. So that would be the finishing cut for this particular cut or pass. Well, I mic'd it, and I need about 7 thousandths or so to take it down to 3/16. So I'm going to feed in half of that amount. I'm looking at the indicator that you cannot see. Now I'll take this pass, I won't show the whole thing, and we'll mic it and see how accurate I can actually turn. Yeah, you see it's still cutting. So I might be undersized. Alright, let's see what we got. Almost right on, you know, within 1,000th or so. So I've just proved that this little machine is capable of fine work, and it is accurate. Now I'm on a learning curve here now in regards to the feeds and how much it will flex and different things like that, but I'm pretty satisfied, other than the final cut wasn't real smooth there because you saw me come back across it and kind of mess it up. But overall, it was capable. See, that's not a very good finish. Alright, let's do something else. Okay, you've seen me turn between centers, so now I'm going to take the work out, remove the faceplate, install the 4-jaw chuck, and set up this little slug of 3/4 inch aluminum, and I'll face this off. We'll see how facing works on this. Now there's no power feed for facing, it'll be strictly a hand operation. So there's the first piece. And I better take the center out. I don't really know if I need to, but I'll take the center out with the little knockout bar and mount the 4-jaw. There's quite a distance between the bearing here and the end of the chuck. In fact, it's about over 1 inch. So that's well, it's not a design flaw, but there'll definitely be a little flexing going on there. I'm going to mount this off camera because it's going to be fiddly. Well, I went back to this big clumsy 2-inch indicator and it works just fine, and after fiddling around here for 3 or 4 minutes I've got it within 1,000th or so, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, other than getting this little hex key into the screws there is a little tricky for each one of them, so that's what took so much time. But I'm happy with that setup, so now I'm going to go ahead and adjust the tool and face this piece off. Well, this isn't going to work. One of the jaws is striking, you can't see it on the back side there, it's striking the apron. So let me see if I can readjust the tool, or I'll have to put a longer piece of work in there, but I guess I'm already pretty much at its capacity. Even though I extended the tool out and turned it a little bit, I still have that interference. So what I'm going to do is either get a smaller piece, maybe 1/2 inch diameter, this is 3/4, or a little bit longer piece, but then, you know, I'm violating some of the rules as far as setting everything up very close and rigid to avoid flexing. Well, I prepared another piece of 3/4 stock, just a little bit longer, so I do not have that interference. But the other solution, of course, would be to reverse the jaws on the chuck, but I wasn't in the mood for doing that. Now I have tightened the carriage lock and I'm ready to face. Belt slipped. Not too bad. The tool's not quite on center now. I did wiggle a little bit when I tried those other setups. And that was my roughing pass. I could certainly go back and take a lighter cut and feed slowly, and I think achieve a pretty decent finish. You know, when you're an old man, you can't see what you're doing. Makes it hard to make these videos. So I was wearing the optivisor, but I found out that it's even better for me to look into the monitor. You can't see the monitor here, but that greatly enlarges it. So I'm feeding here, but I'm not looking. I'm looking over at the monitor. You know what? For all these years, I thought my cataracts were the problem. And so I got new glasses, and I'll probably get the operation. But the reason I can't see is look at these lenses. I don't think I've cleaned those since 1997. But they feel pitted. Well, that about completes this episode of micro lathes. Now, there are several other operations that I'm going to perform on this machine next time, in the next episode, and then I will switch to the other duo lathe and make 3 or 4 videos or whatever is necessary on that. Now, I'm having a ball doing this. Look at that tiny little shaft. Now, yes, I could do that on one of my bigger lathes, but this is a sensitive machine. That is, you can really feel it cut as you touch it, as you're feeding and so on. And I successfully faced this piece off. So, like I said, next time we'll do a few other operations, and I have no intention at this time of making a project on these lathes. I'm just trying to determine their usability and validity. Are they usable machines for a model maker? And to this point, I would say yes. Probably not for me because I'm used to the bigger stuff, but if you're working on something this size or smaller, I believe it would be quite useful. However, I do think you need to use indicators, as I have shown you, as far as the depth of the cut and all of that. But then again, we do that type of we take that kind of care on other lathes as well with a digital readout. So I don't think they make a digital readout small enough for this. All right, I hope you enjoyed it. A lot of still pictures at the end. Make sure you watch the previous 3 and continue to follow me as I make more and more videos on the wonderful little Manson lathe. So long for now. I removed the chuck and I left the work in the chuck jaws, and with a close-up here you'll see that the finish is quite a bit better than what I thought it was, even though it was my roughing cut. I would call that a success. Behind the scenes.